Hi, everyone. I'm Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today. I have been a space and astronomy journalist for over 20 years. A lot of the times we cover all the different space and astronomy news stories that you might be interested in. I bring on special guests to go behind the scenes to give you the inside scoop on what is happening. And today I'm rejoined my friend Chris Prophet, who we've talked. This is like a fourth time that we've
I
talked.
think it's fourth.
Four, yeah. You are
Or 3.5.
3.5. Yeah, exactly. You are my go-to guy for all things SpaceX, and it's been a couple of years, so we definitely do some catching up. So, hey, Chris, how you doing?
Oh, I'm fine and fit, and I'm happy to be here. Keep track of your show. I like it. Yeah, especially the answers and questions,
Oh,
or
good.
whichever way you want to phrase it.
So, if for people who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm a writer, and I write fiction. But back in 2016, I was happily completing or getting towards the end of a nice fiction, and I was happy with the characters, happy with the stories. But then suddenly the penny dropped, and I realized what SpaceX was going to be announcing at the end of the year, and it sort of came to me. Well, on one hand, I'm writing about science fiction about what could happen in the future, and there is a company who is actually making what I'm writing about happen right now. So which one's the most important one to write about? So that's where I went to. I went to SpaceX, and I've been happy there ever since.
Yeah, no, not that you work for SpaceX, but you have been covering SpaceX for since
Yeah.
2016.
I mean, that's correct. I mean, I won't say whether I'll neither confirm or deny whether I've had contact with people at SpaceX,
Right.
because that can get them into a lot of
Well, you got to
trouble.
protect your sources. I understand that. Yeah.
Right.
So, I guess there's been a lot of developments that have happened in the world of SpaceX since we last talked, and I wanted to cover a bunch of kind of history first, and then we'll move forward into the future. So let's talk about Crew Dragon and essentially SpaceX's delivery of a human-rated spacecraft finally to the United States of America. So what's the story with that?
Crew Dragon. Well, it's a beautiful story, really. They completed the Falcon 9, and it's a great job. They spent like 300 million on it, and NASA estimated it was going to be 3.6 billion to produce an equivalent vehicle. They had some lovely missions to the ISS with their cargo Dragon, and it was just a natural evolution, really, just to go to Crew, because that's part of the big goal for SpaceX, well, for Elon in particular, and that's human space travel. So yeah, that was a priority, and that worked for them. I mean, there was problems. There's always problems, but I mean, they just kept going. They, as Gwyn Shotwell puts it, they just put their head down and charge for the line. They get there. They do the job at the end of the day. They had to sort of reinvent some NASA standards as regards parachutes, because there's such a problem. They did some tension tests on the risers, and it was not at all equal. And that was going to cause some problems with the parachutes. I mean, they've still got problems with the parachutes, but they went to different materials, Xylon and lighter materials for the canopy, and it all came good in the end. I mean, the rocket is fantastically safe. Saying that, I touch wood, but they've had piles of missions, 100 missions, I believe, without a hiccup,
Well,
basically.
for Falcon 9, yeah, and
Falcon 9, yeah.
reuse, which is kind of amazing. Like I think some are
Oh, yeah.
crossing 10 reuses at this point of Falcon 9.
12, I
12.
think it's 12 launches at latest count. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. Some people make a sort of mistaken judgment about SpaceX, Tesla, Boeing company, they sort of look at what they produce and say, well, that's who they are. But it's not really true. They're all technology development companies, except for in different sectors. SpaceX is in the space sector, and Tesla's in the car sector, and the Boeing company, well, that's underground. So, but that's where their real finesse is, that when they're real forte, they're hiding their light under a bushel. I mean, yes, they launch vehicles, but what they're really good at is tech development. That's why they managed to sort of just bull through on the Dragon and bring it to market so quickly and successfully.
It's interesting. You know, my background is in computers, computer software development. And this idea of iterative development. I mean, anyone who's a programmer, anyone who's ever worked on a tech platform, you know, you add a little bit of code, you recompile your code, you add a little bit more code, you see if it broke anything you already did, add a little more, you increment, and the faster you can, you know, you can increment and test what you've done and lock it in, the more stable your technology works over the long term, as opposed to developing something very complicated. We call them cathedrals. You build a cathedral versus the bazaar, and you build this giant cathedral, and then you try to compile the whole thing, and it all just comes apart, and there's bugs everywhere, and nobody knows what to do. And it's the key is the iteration. And it really feels like, you know, with, say, NASA's, with the SLS, I mean, here we are, we've just seen one of the major tests. We're probably a couple of months away, but it is 20 years in the making, this next generation rocket system. While SpaceX, as you said, $300-ish million to develop, you know, to develop the entire Falcon 9 system. Well, SLS is going to be $4 billion a launch, we're hearing at this point.
4.1, yeah.
4.1, yeah. Sorry, you know,
this week's price.
Right, with 100 million here and there.
Following a ticker.
Yeah. So I guess what role? How does that iterative development play out across the company?
Well, it's absolutely essential. They bring hardware to test as soon as possible. To do a software analogy, I believe they do an alpha test for the software, and then a beta, and then bring it to market. That's exactly what they do, but with hardware. I mean, Blue Origin drool over the ability to do this. They've never quite mastered it, but SpaceX are really good at it. I mean, as soon as you start putting anything together that approximates the job you want to perform, you start to learn things about the process, about the problems you're encountered, and you can incorporate those in each iteration. And by the time you actually get to the final hardware, it's rock solid, because you've literally explored the whole envelope of problems and possibilities, and you've found out what works and what doesn't work, and you've really made it strong. It's just a great way of operating. It's so logical. You know, you think, well, why would anybody do anything else, really? I mean, this is what I'm on about, the tech development. This is what they're good at, and this is how they do it, because they go in right from day one. They're hardware heavy, and then they just get heavier as they go through the process. Right? They don't mind burning hardware. That's what it's there for.
Now, we heard this week that SpaceX has actually stopped development of the Crew Dragon. They've built 4 capsules, I think, and now they've stopped.
Well, they've actually stopped development for some time now, but they've stopped constructing them now, because basically they have a reusable fleet, and that reusable fleet should just see them through until Starship starts doing its launches. I have a few trepidations about Starship, because basically if you attempt to dock that to the ISS, well, might be a few problems there, because I understand when the shuttle used to dock, because of the transfer momentum, it used to send sort of ripples backwards and forwards through the station, and it used to creak for days. But this is a much larger vessel, basically, Starship. I think really they should do like they have in The Expanse, where they have like an extendable, like connection between the two, so there's no that huge transfer of momentum. Yeah, but we'll see. They're always coming up with some new stuff and stuff that's interesting.
That's
But yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a pity about Dragon, but everything has its day.
Do you think, I mean, we've been looking at the development of the SLS and the Orion capsule and the role it's going to play in the Artemis mission. Do you think that it could be done with even the Falcon Heavy and an upgraded version of Crew Dragon? Could that carry people to the moon?
Well, yeah, anything's possible. They'd have to put some more radiation mitigation in there. But
Right.
I mean, it's basically you're talking about materials and compounds which have got high hydrogen content, because hydrogen is just great at knocking down radiation energy. So that's not too difficult. They might lose some internal volume. Yeah, sure. But that's if you absolutely had to get to the moon. If NASA came to them and said, okay, we need to be at the moon next year, they could do it. They could do it now, but that's not the plan. It's not part of the big plan. Big plan is all about Starship. I mean, yeah, if if they wanted to do it with Starship next year, now that would be a challenge.
Right.
Because they're still in the boondocks at the moment with that.
Yeah.
They're getting there. They're getting there.
Well, right. So let's shift gears. I mean, Crew Dragon is really an interim technology. It's designed to fill that gap between the cancellation of the space shuttle and the arrival of Starship. So again, it's been a couple of years. I don't think we even talked last time we had talked. I don't think Starship had even flown yet. So now we've seen Starship fly, return safely to the landing pad. We've seen a bunch of them explode. And so from that successful test flight, what does the Boca Chica launch facility look like today? What's going on there?
Well, there's just so much going on. It's just tremendous, the expansion over a couple of years. They just, I remember going on Reddit and saying, well, it's just a field at the moment and they're constructing these star hoppers like you would a ship out in the open. And I said, well, they'll have to put down some hangars to give it some shelter. And I was absolutely hauled across the coals for that one. But every 6 months, we see a larger hangar coming into place. I just love the joined up thinking they have. It's great. You want that in all of your space exploits. I mean, I'll give you an example. The large hangar they're building at the moment, they call it the wide bay. Some people call it the mega bay. It's huge. They won't have any more problems about having these 9-meter wide vessels in there. Because at the moment, sometimes they have to pull one out to shuffle some stuff around inside and then put it back in again. But the wide bay, you can just put 4 in there. There's no problems at all. But as regards joined up thinking, Elon says they're probably happy with this 9-meter size, and it would be more than 4 times harder to make something larger than that. But he didn't discount they would make it in the future.
Well, he had said that Starship is the minimal viable size to make a fully reusable 2-stage rocket. And that an 18-meter fairing would probably be even more efficient, but not necessarily twice as tall, but it would be wider, stubbier. But you're saying that, in fact, he said that it turns out that's probably going to be a lot more expensive than previously believed.
Expensive. It's just paper at the end of the day to him. He's the richest man in the world, by quite a large margin. He never has problems finding money. But yeah, it would be more than 4 times more difficult technically to do. I mean, that's the main thing that worries him. Writing a check, no problem, but actually getting in there and building it up and making it work, that'd be tough.
So if you were to if you were to visit Boca Chica facility right now and look around there, what is arrayed now? Because you see a whole bunch of rockets and launch gantries and stuff. So what is the state of all of this equipment now?
It's in a high state of readiness. It's good. I mean, whenever the FAA comes through with that,
right? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm more what do they have? What do they have stocked up? I mean, they've got the launch gantry. They've got how many boosters? What's there and ready to go?
Okay, well, they've got a whole rocket garden full of starships and a booster there. They've got another, not they got two boosters on the pad. Uh, it seems very likely, though, that they're going to the next iteration. The problem is they produce them so quickly that by the time it gets to the pad, it's sort of obsolete by the next one in the line behind them. I mean, I'm particularly impressed by the booster number 7, which has just kicked the booster number 4 off the pad. It has these chines that run down the side, which are like aerodynamic bumps, which cover the COPVs, the composite overwrapped pressure vessels, and they can be, you think, just something which is maybe a meter deep. That wouldn't have much effect. You wouldn't get much lift. But if you're flying at a hypersonic reentry, you will get a substantial amount of sort of glide ability with that. That'll reduce the amount of fuel you need to get back to the launch pad, which is always a big thing.
So the skyscraper is going to be attempting to glide back to the launch pad.
Oh dear! And then the arms will of course come out and catch it, and there'll be no problem, and it'll just set it down on the pad, and they won't lose any boosters at all. No, it'll be easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Yeah. It is definitely a bold, risky play to catch your booster on the launch gantry with this exact thing. If it comes down a few meters per second too fast and the thing detonates, you lose the booster, you lose all the boosters that were nearby, you lose the starships that were nearby, and you lose the launch gantry, which couldn't have been cheap. So it is a brave
gamble,
engineering angle. Yeah, exactly.
Gamble. But saying that, I don't know if you noticed the last landing by the Falcon 9 for the. No. It was basically so central on the landing ship, all right, that they had signal throughout. Normally, what happens is it's slightly off center, and the landing ship just wobbles, and that knocks the antenna out, right? So you don't get a signal. But now it just came straight down onto the X.
You just explained the mystery.
Signal all the way through.
I had no idea. Yeah. So people always ask me like why does the signal always cut when the rocket's just about to land? And that's because the landing is a little off angle and it tips the satellite dish away from. That's interesting. I had no idea. Wow, thank you.
So the rocket was actually stabilizing the landing platform.
That's amazing. Yeah, it was so perfect. Yeah. So then when do we expect Starship is going to actually attempt an orbital flight, and what will that mission look like?
Okay, well, according to Elon, that is May, but it's down to the FAA. Good old FAA. It's going to look like a year since they've started their investigation. I think, to be honest, they were a little surprised because they already did the long investigation before 2014, the environmental investigation, and said, yeah, you can have a spaceport there. Because they get loads of applications from all around the country saying, oh, can we change the designation from this airport to a spaceport? You know, we think it might look good on our resume, right? And they say, oh yeah, no problem, yes. But I think it was a bit of a shock for them because not only did SpaceX create a spaceport there, that they also used it as well for launching vehicles, and then they're going, oh, you didn't say you were going to use it though, did you?
Yeah.
And of course, because they iterate, it just goes like Topsy. There's loads of extra stuff there, you know, bigger vehicles, higher heights, and it's just shocked them. So they've done this programmatic environmental assessment again, and it'll probably take a year, and at the end of that, hopefully we're going to launch this summer.
It's a sensitive environment. It's a marine coast. It's a fairly sensitive environment. They've exploded a bunch of starships that drop wreckage, propellant, and material all around this fairly sensitive landscape. I think caution is wise. If they plan to scale this thing up to the size that they want to do with multiple starships launching every single day and the potential for disasters, I think we can take an extra year or two to just make sure we can mitigate the environmental threat of these launches.
Well, you say that. Yes, it is surrounded by wildlife preservation areas, but that's exactly the same as what happens at the Cape. Merritt
Mm-hmm.
Island is right there at the end of the range. And in fact, Merritt Island is probably a better nature preservation area because of all the activity at Kennedy, because it keeps people away from it. Wildlife loves it when there's no people there. And I think, well, the road's closed all this week for SpaceX activities, so the beach is theirs, and all the surrounding, all that lovely salt flats, whatever you want to call it, mud flats that surrounds it, which is such a vital thing to preserve. It's lovely, yeah.
So, so, so maybe, I mean, I've seen maybe the end of May, sometime in May, we could see an orbital launch, but it's not going to use the launch gantry. How will this launch go? What's supposed to happen?
Well, as far as I understand, it's going to go on stage 0, which is that large tripod. Well, it's a tripod. It's an elevated platform. That's the plan. They're going to have a deluge system, and it's going to cut down on the noise so it doesn't demolish everything in the area, because there will be a lot of noise on that. And hopefully, it's going to take off
Yeah.
and land. Now,
So what's going to take off?
well, a full stack. They really want to do a full stack. That's Elon is impatient. They have the hardware, and if something goes wrong, they have more
Right.
hardware coming up. We're looking at B7 at the moment on the pad, but they've got B8. That's
So
in a good
B7
state.
is the super heavy booster.
Yeah,
And
B7.
what's special about B7?
Well, it has these chines. And it has the better alignment of the COPVs. It's going to have the Raptor 2 engines. It's incredible. What I was saying, they're a technology development company. Blue Origin started their development of B4 about the same time as Raptor. They actually borrowed a few engineers from SpaceX from the Raptor program to work on B4.
Yeah.
And I think they've produced less than 10 now. I believe the figure's 9 engines, and then none of them have actually sort of worked. But SpaceX, they've passed the 100 engine mark quite some time ago, and they're now on to the next iteration, a serious iteration, which is Raptor 2, which is, I mean, the original engine, Raptor 1, looked fussy, basically. There was a lot of stuff, bits hanging off it, but this is just sweet. It's really been simplified. It's lovely. I mean, just little things. This is the joined up thinking I was telling you about. Removing the flanges, because you have O-rings in flanges, and it's a point of failure basically, and it's extra weight. I mean, that was what caused the Challenger disaster, as I understand it. There was seals between each of the rings, and one of them leaked, and that cut through onto the hydrogen tank like a torch, and that's just at the end of Challenger. So you remove those flanges, you make them welded. That should be, in theory, a much safer engine, a much more practical operating. So yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing Raptor 2 in action, but I'm really intrigued by the engine after that, which we've heard about.
Oh,
which
really?
Is, yeah. There's another engine coming. We're not even sure whether it's a chemical engine, but it's one that Elon said that it's not going to be called Raptor, and it's going to be used for multi-planetary transport.
Wait a second. Okay, wait a second. You say we're not sure that it's going to be a chemical engine. What are our other options?
Well, there's they have been sort of experimenting with these Hall thrusters that they use on Starlink, so they're not electric propulsion. It could be chemical. I mean, they're really good at chemical engines, as you can see between BO and SpaceX. The difference is just frightening. I classed Blue Origin as a tech company. but SpaceX is a tech development company, and
Mm-hmm.
there's quite a difference there, as you say, from as you can see from the performance. But go on.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, the fact that they're building this experience with the Starlinks and those Hall thrusters. They've got Krypton propellant
Mm,
Hall
mm.
thrusters, and to sort of take that experience and try to scale it up for something that would work interplanetary would be really interesting.
Oh, yes.
Nuclear, like a fission rocket, but I doubt they're going to be able to get their hands on some kind of fission reactor to be able to do this work. So let's go back to the story on what's going to launch. We talked about, we've got BB7, which is going to be the super heavy with the new Raptor 2 engines. What Starship is probably going to be on top of it?
It's S24, I believe, is the next one up. It's just a good. It's the latest iteration. It's the best they got. So it's gonna go. Look, the tiling on it, the star bricks, looking really nice, sweet. I can't believe they're actually intending to try and catch the returning starships with those arms, the Mechazilla arms as well. NASA will never agree for that for the crew program.
Now, the plan with this first launch, though, is to not launch it. They're not going to try and land and catch it the first time around, right? They're going to try and dish them into the ocean.
Never say never. The original plan they had with the FCC was to launch a full stack, and then B-20 would come. The booster would come down and land in the ocean off the shore, so they could see whether they could guide it back close to the landing point, and then the Starship was going to do almost an orbit, and it would re-enter sort of north of the Hawaii Islands. So that all looked great. That was a good mission for the last iteration of Starship, right, and booster. But this new iteration, which has got the Raptor 2 engines, who knows? They might be even more ambitious. They might try and bring it back to the pad, because those engines are sweet indeed. They are like they had a little bit of problem with the prior Starship and booster. I mean, there's no delicate way of saying it. They were a little overweight. All right, it's the problem is there's always mass growth on these things, and the engines were not quite hitting the performance mark they wanted. It was like 185 tons, where they were really looking for 200, and the mass growth it's not ideal. So, but the new models they've got, the B7, S24, that's just with those Raptor 2s on it, they go up to like 230 tons thrust. They're even lighter. I mean, Elon's looking to get it down to 1.5 tons, the actual weight of the engine, which is really light for that sort of power of engine. That's an enormous thrust to weight ratio. So they can do that. Well, they could do anything with those vehicles, really.
So you think now that we're going to see not this original flight profile, but we might actually see a return to the pad for both the booster and the Starship, like in the original plan?
I doubt they bring the Starship back. Maybe land that somewhere safe, like in that range in Hawaii, but not in the ocean. Not drop them both in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's a possibility, because I mean, if I was building those engines are so good, so nice. I wouldn't want to be throwing away in the ocean. I want to get them back and take a look at them afterwards, especially if you've got a good chance of controlling them, which I believe he has.
Yeah, it's like the SLS when you think about them launching the RS-25 engines, which flew with the space shuttle for years and years, and now they're going to be ditching these engines into the ocean with the first stage of the SLS. It's just it's a heartbreak. It's like the Ferrari of rocket engines, and they're just going to be destroyed.
Dumped in the ocean. Yeah. Sad indeed. As you say, it's a little bit of a step backwards, because they did have a reusable spacecraft, and now they've just gone to disposable ones for chucking the whole thing away in the ocean, except for the Orion. They say they can reuse that, but I think they'll just make new ones, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So then, in theory, a month from now, 2 months from now, okay, come on, Elon time, 6 months
Mm.
from now, 9 months from now, we see some version of this thing succeed. It's able, and I think, for me, really, it's the engineering of the heat shield that is now the big question. We've seen booster
Mm.
rockets launch and land. We've seen Starship do its thing. We've seen it glide, do its flip. The question is, will those heat tiles keep it alive through the return to the atmosphere?
And they're going to find out how.
Find out. Yeah.
Get that hardware up there and see what happens. See how many they come back on. I mean,
Yeah.
even if they lose a tile or two, though, this is the brilliant thing about the Starship. It has a stainless steel superstructure, so even if they lose a tile, it's resistant. They've got a blanket underneath, and then they've got the stainless steel. So it's not at all certain that the vehicle will be lost. I mean, if as long as they get it back, it might be a little bit bent. They can look at it and see what works, what doesn't. And that's the main thing. I'm well pumped to see that.
Yeah.
That will be the major a major threshold for the space program. Fully reusable vehicles.
It is like, it feels to me like this is the point where everything changes if it works. If it doesn't work, then everyone's caution, everyone's skepticism was well placed. But if it does work, then every other rocket company is going to be left holding the bag. They will have been developing old technology, the wrong technology. They will not have access to a reusable two-stage rocket, which will bring down flight costs orders of magnitude. Like, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but it feels like it just evaporates the launch market overnight.
Well, no. The thing is, they said Nokia can never be bumped off its perch, and it was the technology was the best it could possibly be. And then along came, like, BlackBerry was it, and knocked down the iPhone, and it just knocked them off. But Nokia's still there. They're still in operation. Kodak, they developed the electronic camera and then suppressed it for so many years because they thought they'd lose business. But they're still there. Brands don't die as long as they've got some chance of making money. Now, you're right. In 2023, SpaceX will probably transition from launch dominance to launch supremacy, because there's a lot of problems with vehicles at the moment. Like, anything that uses a Russian engine, like the Antares or Atlas V, they're just they're gone. They're like a vapor trail. As soon as they run out of those engines. Anything that launches on Soyuz, that's got to come across basically to SpaceX. The Ariane 6, that ideally that will launch at the end of this year, but I've got a feeling there might be some delays on that. And Vulcan is definitely delayed. I feel sorry for the ULA, because they've got all these launches lined up for defense, and those launches, they're not going to be able to fulfill them on Vulcan. It's not. It usually takes 2 years to certify a new rocket, and they haven't even started it. The clock starts when they launch the Vulcan for the first time.
Yeah, I mean,
that's all stuff coming over to SpaceX.
Yeah, and people are so excited about SpaceX running away with this, and I think it's a disaster. Like, I think it's a terrible thing. Like, obviously, it's great that SpaceX is accomplishing and pushing the rocket industry, but you need healthy competition. We need Blue Origin to get in there and start launching and use that Bezos money to catch up and be a serious, healthy competitor. We need the smaller launch providers like Rocket Lab to come and really be vigorous in the small sat market. We need Europe to take two-stage rockets seriously, and the Chinese are furiously working on their version of Starship as well. So I think it's going to be it's going to be a bit of a monopoly for a few years, but I think you're right. I think the hope is that all of these other providers will catch up and bring that healthy competition back into the market.
Well, I'll say they'll never catch up. I'll go out on a limb here. What they'll do is they'll try and develop what SpaceX is doing now, and that's like as a Canadian, you might understand this. It's like skating towards where the puck is now. By the time you get there, the pucks move on, and SpaceX is never ever going to stop development because that's what they do. That's their thing. So the only thing they could hope for is SpaceX is just going to bigger and bigger stuff. They're no longer a launch company. They're moving into becoming a space transport company. So there's going to be plenty of space here on the ground for launch companies to launch from Earth. I mean, Rocket Lab has got a great design. Say, plenty of Chinese people coming up with stuff. There's always going to be some market there to launching to orbit. If they don't want to wait for these huge mega rockets that SpaceX is launching, but SpaceX is happy because they're doing their thing. They're on the way to the moon. They're on the way to Mars. Bigger and better things. If ever people want to do launch stuff, they're not going to crush them. Or I mean, they're even launching OneWeb satellites. They're going to be every satellite they launch, they'll probably lose like a couple of $1 million from lost business because Starlink is competing directly with OneWeb, but they don't mind, competition.
Yeah.
It's made them strong. It's making, they have to bite, claw to get where they are now, and it's made them a strong company.
Well, you say that, but I mean, the market leader always gets fat and lazy. So if the longer SpaceX goes without having serious competition, the slower, less competitive it'll become, and eventually competitors will show up to give it a serious challenge. It may be able to last a long time, but I do kind of have faith in a healthy competition. So I want to talk about the sort of integration of Starship into the Artemis mission. And NASA, I don't know if you saw, NASA released a series of documents showing how they plan to actually use Starship with Artemis and sort of how the launch profile is going to work. Can we talk about this? How is Starship going to play a role in the return to the moon?
Well, they've got 4 moon landings scheduled so far and under contract to NASA. The vehicle that they've come up with, it looks great. It's got a lift, so you can, elevator, so you can go from the top to the bottom because it's quite a tall vehicle, and it's got twin airlocks. That's pretty well unknown, really, for the other 2 designs they had for the same competition. Redundant airlocks, so you can have people coming and going at the same time.
Wow, I didn't know about that. That's amazing.
Well, in theory, you could have 100 people in there, but I think they'll have a little less, as the Orion can only take 4 at the moment,
right,
and only 2 of those will be going down. Yes, but I mean. It's just a beast of a lander. It's interesting because NASA actually came to them, SpaceX, and SpaceX were going to do like a lander to their original specification, which was like the national team and Dynetics, a relatively small affair. But NASA said to them, well, could you do something with the Starship? And they said, oh, well, yeah, of course. Wow, you want Starship? Fine. And they put it in. But the idea is that because it can put like 100 tons of useful payload. I mean, Elon says 200 tons, but I think he might be classing the actual lander as well as being useful payload, because it's a habitat. You can use it as a base station as well. But you put 100 tons on the moon, you can build I said a star base, a moon base there. That's the long-term plan. So they're planning ahead, and if you have a permanent settlement on the moon, well, you have 2 major destinations. You have Earth and you have the moon. Then you can start building up a real space economy. It's fabulous.
So how will this work then? Like, SpaceX will launch Are they going to refuel it? How are they going to sort of set up to be prepared to become the lander? How will that mission profile work?
Well, they launch the HLS, the Human Landing System, to orbit. It doesn't need fins. It doesn't need a heat shield. This is not coming back to Earth. And then it docks with their refueling depot, and which is just tops it right up to the top of the tank, and then off it goes to the moon, and it'll go into orbit around the moon. Wait until the Orion docks with it and lands, or if the unmanned ones, it'll just go straight there and land. And hopefully, later on, there will be a facility to bring it back.
Will it provide like services to multiple missions?
Yeah, I mean that's the plan, as I understand it. It's gonna the first few might get left there, but if they can shuttle it between the moon and low lunar orbit, you could put like a tanker there as well, and then you just run it backwards and forwards. You really don't need much propellant to take off from the moon and get to the lunar. I think it's like 1.6 as delta V, where it's like 10 for a reusable vehicle to get from Earth to low Earth orbit. So it's not too bad. You don't need much. Right. Big vehicle like that. Yeah.
And so we can kind of imagine the Space Launch System is going to launch. It's going to be carrying the Orion capsule. It's going to fly up to meet with the Orion capsule will meet with Starship, which will be kind of hilarious. The astronauts will get out of their Orion capsule, get into the Starship. Starship will land on the moon. They'll take an elevator down to the star. Again, when you think about the lunar lander, and then you think about this gigantic rocket as a lunar lander, and then they'll perform their mission and come back. But with the amount of cargo, you see them being more permanent this time around than the Apollo.
Oh yeah. I mean that's what the whole thing is designed for. The HLS Starship. It's basically a base. You're putting a skyscraper on the moon, which you can use as a base, right? And if you want to build anything else, that's fine, but you've got everything you need there. You've got your full life support system. You've got a easy entry and exit. You can even roll some buggies out if you want to. If you something you fold up and go on the elevator. It's just everything NASA could ever possibly dream of on the moon. Straight away, as soon as you land it. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like they haven't got the hardware figured out that they're going to want to bring, because the capability of this as a lander is so ludicrous that they haven't even they even know what they're going to fill it with yet.
It's paradigm shift, they call it. Yeah, you sort of get into the mindset, right? Well, we've got to have all of our hardware has got to be able to fold up and go within like a 3 meter fairing or a 5 meter fairing. But no, you're talking about 9 meters, and it doesn't have to fold. You just put it in there, and strap it down. You're ready to go.
I was talking with Casey Hanmer a couple of months ago, and he was talking about how he doesn't see a lot of people at NASA and various space agencies really thinking about the capability of Starship and what that can bring to their missions, effectively either dramatically reducing the cost, increasing the size of the payload, increasing the amount of that they can launch. Do you think that people are taking this system seriously as they plan out their missions?
Well, I think publicly, no, because they've got all of their systems in place. They've got all the technology they're comfortable with. It's a pity, really, because between wars you get into a very sort of status quo way of operating. Technology sort of sometimes takes 1 step forwards and 2 steps backwards, like the SLS, which is going from a partially reusable to a non-reusable vehicle. Instead of fighting somebody else in a wartime setting, you you fighting your neighbor or somebody who has a different colored flag to you, or in the all sorts of things. Whereas more time, people tend to set aside their differences and don't even want luxuries. So, but as it's coming back to your point, they've got their way of doing things, and they're wedded to the SLS. And if they don't have SLS, they don't have any money. So at the moment, they're just sort of putting it on the back burner.
Yeah.
But they are aware, I am sure they are aware of the potentiality of Starship, because they did invite them into the Artemis program. So, that was a nice backdoor, because even though it's Congress really doesn't want Starship, because it's like the death knell for SLS, because it's supporting them in the Artemis program. Well, that was a key move by NASA. You've got to give them the score on that one, because they got to fund both at the end of the day. That was.
Yeah, it is interesting that to demonstrate that he can provide a reasonable solution to this, they're having to develop this entirely on their own with essentially originally no support from NASA. They've done this all privately, and it's only and you can imagine, like, they'll have to send a rocket to the moon carrying their own astronauts waving from the moon to going, now can we supply a rocket system to the moon, please? Now can we be a part of this? That was originally what Musk had said. Is like, is this what it's going to take? Is us actually landing on the moon to prove that we can help you land on the moon?
It's funny because I wrote a book called New Space, Our Shining Future. And I said, well, eventually SpaceX would go so far down the development route that NASA would just be forced to bring a whole dump truck full of money and just empty it on SpaceX's doorstep, because they cannot allow a Starship to fly without that NASA meatball on the side of it, because it's just political suicide. That the accountability Congress. Well, why is there a private space program which is outperforming you 2-1, and it only costs like a tenth of what we're giving you? So yes, now they are aware of Starship, and it is coming increasingly into the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now your new book is detailing the future plans of SpaceX into the far future. What do you think what comes next? Like, let's assume that Starship works. It becomes dependable. It's able to launch multiple times a day. It's able to send 100 tons to orbit, large volumes off world. What happens then?
Oh, then you're not just talking SpaceX. You're talking about singularity. Elon Musk has a big plan, and it's not just SpaceX. People are beginning to realize now that all of his companies are involved. They all have the same template. They're into tech development. They're in different areas. But sooner or later, there'll be a singularity. He's already hinted at it. He's going to do his Master Plan 3, and that's going to involve SpaceX, Tesla, and Boeing Company. Even though this Master Plan has always been for Tesla, they all come together. He has the rights to a name XCOM, which he bought from PayPal. And he's renewed it recently, even though it was a great difficulty. He said it took him hours to renew his rights to it, because you have to renew it every 10 years, I believe. So he's really interested. He really wants to retain that name for some reason. And he was asked he was asked whether he would actually have a holding company called X, and for all of his shares, because he has ownership of SpaceX basically, and ownership of Boeing Company, and has a substantial and growing stake in Tesla. So yes, they could all just come together under one holding company, and then move together in his large plan. Okay, I can detail a little bit more of that.
Yeah,
if you
what
want.
is the plan?
Big plan.
So X.com, that was the original payment company that he had developed, and then he merged with PayPal, and so he was able to hold on to the X.com domain name and name all this time. That's
Yeah, well, he
interesting.
just paid PayPal for it at the end of the day. I mean, they
Yeah.
convinced him. They nerfed XCOM and said, "Oh, it should really be PayPal, and that's a really good name." And he, "Oh, yes, yes."
Yeah.
But when he left the company, he asked afterwards. He asked if he could actually have that name. And well, we're not doing anything with it. It's just an X. What possible use could it
Yeah.
be?
That's interesting. Yeah. So what is the master plan?
Uh,
what is the as you understand it?
okay. Well, as I see it, the uh, the big plan is SpaceX. Well, all of these companies, they've absolutely been fine-tuned to develop technology. They are some of the best technology companies on the planet. They are really, really good at what they do, but still, it's not enough. Elon says to get from where we are now to a spacefaring society, civilization, something like they have in Star Wars or Star Trek. He prefers Star Trek, or he leans towards
Yeah.
that.
I mean, that's
He's very
obvious.
central.
That's clearly the
For
better.
obvious
It's
reasons.
clearly the better religion.
Ah,
Is Star
don't
Trek.
start
Yeah.
that. Don't
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
but to get there, it's just too big a jump in technology. Uh, the main problem is Earth. It's too high a gravity. The temperature's too high. The air pressure's too high. We're used to those conditions, and it's nothing like that in space. It's mainly the gravity. You get to end up with a few percentage of your payload to get to orbit. Now, so the first step is they really need to get to Mars. That's a great place for launching. You don't even need a booster. It's fabulous. There's materials just lying all around. The reason why it's red is it's iron. That's rust on the surface. So there's plenty of materials lying around there. Fabulous. But he says some interesting things about Mars. He says, well, we understand that they want to have a free planet. It's not just setting up a country there. It's going to be a whole planet is going to be free. Okay, unaligned to any country. That's unusual.
Mm-hmm.
He also says he wants to have direct democracy there, which is basically you sack the politicians. It's like an Athenian democracy where every now and again, when they have a major issue, all the citizens come together and they vote yay or nay. They cast a black stone or a white stone on an issue, and depending on how many stones you have, that's how the vote comes out. Except for on Mars, they want to do it with phones. Everybody sees the issue and they vote yes or no.
That sounds
So
that could get annoying. I'd be like, do you want to increase the budget to this subsection of that? Whatever. I'll just start pressing my phone randomly because I won't care anymore.
Well, it could go that way, but I think the people they're going to be sending to Mars are going to be very interested in their own welfare and survival. And what he wants to do is just have laws which are like 1 or 2 pages long, basically, so anybody can scan through it. Because, as I say, the devil is in the detail. You see any of the current laws being passed, and who gets what and why. That's all going to be gone. You just take a look at it, say yes, and it won't be too often they'll have these laws because they don't want a lot of laws. We already have too many laws. It's just slowing us down. So it seems a bit strange. He's going sort of way out on a limb with all these proposals, but you really have to sort of see it from SpaceX's and his frame of reference. Now, the frame of reference is, yeah, Mars is a great place to launch from, and probably the US is the best place to build space technology and assorted other technology, like Tesla does the surface stuff and Boeing company does the underground stuff. But there's still problems. It's not perfect. For instance, I believe SpaceX approached NASA in 2012 with the idea of an MCT, which is a Mars Colonial Transporter. And NASA was like, well, we have the SLS. We just started a new rocket. Sorry, you've missed that, but they didn't give up. They tried to sell them the idea. They repackaged it in 2016 at the International Astronautical Congress, and they said, oh, it's too ambitious. So they brought down the size at the 2017 in IAC, and they said, well, no, we still can't go for it. And it wasn't until, as you say, they started to actually build one that NASA said, oh, yes, you're building a completely reusable spacecraft. Oh, could we help you pay for that? And they were like,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So you have the problem. I mean, SpaceX even tried to sell the idea to the US Air Force, and they said, oh, too risky. We like to drive technology, but too risky. So for about a decade there, the two groups which should have been supporting this development sort of demurred. I mean, Elon originally said it could be built in 10 to 20 years back in 2011, and presumably 10 years is if he got funding. So right now they could be looking at landings on Mars, but no, they demurred. So that is a problem. They don't have they don't have continuous support from the local government. All right. Another problem. Well, if you want to comment on that.
Well, yeah. I think, I come from the tech world and have been involved in many of those meetings, many of those kinds of conversations with venture capitalists and people wanting to take companies public and looking to increase funding and all that, and I'm a little sick of it. But I can definitely see, like, there's kind of, the stated goal from SpaceX or from Elon Musk is that we want to make humanity multi-planetary, that we want, we've got too many eggs in this one basket. Maybe. Earth is the best place in the universe, and anyone who lives on Mars for probably hundreds of years is going to be mostly just trying to not die. So they're gonna wish, it's gonna be very, very difficult all the time for them. And I can definitely understand, like, some kind of, political system that will try to match that. But you definitely have the entrenched interests of the nations on Earth, and the more powerful that Mars gets, the more they're going to want to influence and apply leverage in various ways. I mean, we've seen this happen many, many times here before on Earth. So I think, trying to scope out a libertarian vision is an interesting, it's an interesting ambition. It's an interesting idea. It's definitely, it would definitely be great to sit down and think about how we can make government and how we can make politics and all that a lot better. And maybe you do need a clean slate to be able to work out some of those ideas in truth, kind of like what happened with the United States and places like that. But I think there's like a lot of reality that needs to catch up here, where the reality of living on Mars needs to be fully understood, where we've got a research station on Mars and people are living there and giving us a true understanding, in the same way that Antarctica shows us what it's like. An Antarctic station shows us what it's like to live in Antarctica. Not fun. Nobody wants to do it. You go there to do research.
Just to your point, so there's two other problems here on Earth. Quickly, too many regulations. They've just lost a year of development due to regulations, having to process their environmental assessment. And at one point, good old Jeff Bezos, bless him, was issuing one lawsuit against SpaceX a week. Right. So every dollar they spend on lawsuits is one less dollar they can spend on moving humanity to the next step of an evolution. So you have all these cultural, societal problems. But if you start again on Mars, you can just say, okay, well, we can have minimal regulations. We can have no regulations if we want. Okay, we can have a legal system, because they do intend to sort of set the constitution for anybody who goes there. and just say, okay, we'll have a legal system where everybody brings a frivolous lawsuit. It just won't come to court. It'll be ruled out before you get there. Government is any are the people going to be interested in space, considering they are in space and they are utterly reliant on those ships coming from Earth? I mean, probably one of the first things they're going to vote on is building mega carriers, because at the moment, as soon as they start sending starships down there, you lose that starship for 26 months. It flies to Mars and it's got to be refueled and comes back. If you can make a mega carrier, a big carrier craft in orbit, say in Mars or Earth, you can use those same starships just to keep ferrying to and from orbit, loaded up with just a humongous amount of cargo, people, goods, whatever. And then just one ship goes there, and then you use the same starships over a two-year period to unload it and load it up to go back. So that is a very logical extension, and Mars would be a great place to do that. But as I say, you don't even need a booster to get to orbit. But regard your point, the cold, it's like 70 degrees C colder on Mars. The atmosphere is 1% of Earth. The gravity is a third. But that is a bonus, because that is a halfway house to deep space, that you sort of instead of like doing that big jump from Earth to space, you're going to Mars, and then all those conditions are sort of semi-like space. So if you can learn to live there, then you can learn to live. That should help you build that mega carrier and live in deep space. And when you've done that, you can send the mega carrier out to the outer solar system, and you can use this as an intrasolar system where it gets even colder and less gravity. And when you've done that, you build even bigger ships to go to the outer edge of the solar system, and then you can use perhaps them to go beyond even once you've completed your adaptation.
Yeah, I always say gravity wells are for suckers. So I think I'd say skip the Mars step and just build those orbital stations and set up your artificial gravity and get.
That's too tough.
Going.
It's too tough. This is Elon's plan. You do it in steps, because he's an engineer. He says, if it's just too big a thing to consume at once, you take it in smaller bites. And Mars is going to be a great place, because it's just, as I say, it's neither in space and it's neither Earth, really. It's its own domain. All right, environment. It's a perfect environment.
We'll see how this all plays out. Chris, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Your newest book, what's it called? Do you have a copy handy?
It hasn't. It's so new; it hasn't even been printed yet. Right? It's called SpaceX Evolution, and it just goes into quite some depth about the big plan and how they're going to achieve it, and the effects on humanity long term. I mean, ambition really is too small a word for it if he's going to raise our society to a full spacefaring sort of culture, and he has a plan. I mean, he wants to do it. He wants to do it before 2050, because he wants to do it in his lifetime. He thinks if something needs doing, you need to do it now. So that's why he's going to Mars. He's gonna go there in the next 10 years, he says. So he always goes where the bottleneck is, and the bottleneck will definitely be Mars. Making them self-sustaining before 2015. He's got a lot of work on his hands.
He really does. Yeah. Well, Chris, absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm sure we'll talk in a couple more years, and we'll get a chance to reference this and see how all of these technologies are progressing. But thanks for coming by, and good luck with your books.
Okay. Oh, thanks for having me. And
all right,
I love the show.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.
End stream.